Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, Principal Atmospheric Scientist at Nutrient Ag Solutions, and I want to thank you for watching this weekly Ag Weather Update brought to you by the Farm Credit Associations of North Carolina. Well, Christmas Eve was pretty rough across parts of the state, and I'm zoomed in here on the very southeast corner of North Carolina. And what you're watching here is what we call in atmospheric sciences a QLCS, which stands for Quasi-Linear Convective System. Now basically what it means is you have a line of storms, but they're actually broken up and displaced from one another a little bit. I'll pause it right here. When you see this, you see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You can see another one, 6, 7, 8. These are all embedded cells that are kind of propagating along, but they have a linear structure to them. The thing about this, though, is that on the southern side of each one of these little hooks you see here, you can get some rotation. Some of the rotation can spin up a brief tornado. And when we look back to Christmas Eve, we look at those total storm reports here. That whole frontal boundary, which stretched all the way from the mid-Atlantic down to Florida, produced numerous reports of severe storms, including these red dots, which represent tornadoes, and one of those near Evergreen here in North Carolina. So it was a really rough go of it here at the just the day before Christmas. Now, putting the total amount of precipitation we had from last week onto our total year's worth. Well, let's just look at last week first of all. Due to those storms racing through, we can see that some pockets picked up between 1 inch and 2+ inches of rainfall. So let's add it up, and this is what we've got. This is likely where we're going to finish the year on our total precipitation ranks by climate district, with several of the climate districts in North Carolina here having a top 3 wettest. Only these two here, which were dry midsummer, are showing up as a top 10 wettest, but not the wettest. So this has been one of those years where we look back on it and just see tremendous amounts of rainfall throughout the year. So the big question is, as we start 2021, what's the pattern going to give us? And are we going to get a chance to dry down? Well, to start that discussion on the pattern, I want you to look at this map. What it looks at here is the jet stream level winds for November and December. And I want you to see a couple of things here. The strongest winds coming off of Japan right in through here extended into the Central Pacific, but weakened and broke and split into 2 pieces that kind of came back together over the East Coast and then raced out into the North Atlantic. But the split was really happening over here along the West Coast of the United States. Well, here's the first bit of change we have to talk about. Over the next week or so, the jet stream is going to nose its way farther into the Pacific and therefore hit the west coast of the United States more square on. The subtropical branch of the jet stream picks up here and grabs onto that flow across the eastern part of the United States. But now the split in the jet stream is in the Atlantic. And when it splits like this with a big ridge going up toward Greenland, we call that the negative phase of the North Atlantic Oscillation. Now, why is this important? Well, there are 2 boxes here I want you to look at, and I'll put my black box around them. On the left, I have a time series of the Arctic Oscillation, and on the right, the North Atlantic Oscillation. And here's what I want you to see. In November into the beginning of December, the Arctic Oscillation was up here well above 0, so it's positive. And then it slowly transitioned throughout December to come down here to negative values, and it is forecast to continue to stay there. Same thing with the North Atlantic Oscillation. Positive values here, now down to 0 or below 0, and forecast to stay down there. That's what that top right panel shows. Now, why discuss this? Well, it all has to do with the flow of the jet stream. And by the time we get to day 10, which is the 6th of January, this is going to be the pattern we're going to finish 2020 with and start 2021 with. So look at it. These are troughs and ridges. The jet stream is going to come screaming around like this, running into the United States, and it's going to pass right over the Rocky Mountains and crank off numerous systems in the midsection of the country. But what I mentioned to you a few moments ago about the negative Arctic Oscillation, which deals with high pressure at the surface sitting here, and the negative phase of the North Atlantic Oscillation, which deals with this big ridge that you see here in red, these 2 features tend to favor a storm track that comes racing up the East Coast and then gets pulled here into the North Atlantic. These have no trouble drawing on a lot of Atlantic moisture and Gulf of Mexico moisture, and it's a setup where we have a very active storm track. So let me show what I mean. This is the 15-day outlook for precipitation anomalies from the European, and this is the GFS. And you can see a lot of greens on these maps representing wetter than average conditions from the west coast all the way to the east coast. Maybe the only places showing up a little drier than normal will be the Canadian Prairie, for example, or possibly in the southwest. But other than that, this is a very, very active pattern that we're watching. Here are the pieces that are coming together for our next couple of systems. One is sliding right now, and it's going to take a very long time for it to go from Southern California over to like Mexico and Texas before it emerges midweek. And in the time that it takes to do that, this little shortwave you see right here, it's going to fly through this trough, come into the west coast, and dive down to meet that. And they're both going to come together in the central and southern plains to produce a pair of low pressure systems that are going to be running off to the north and east through the Great Lakes states. And as a result, that's going to drag a front through us, and we better take a look at what this is going to do. Now, in the near term, it's going to take some time for these things to get there, so all the action is to our west. Notice on our all hazards weather map, we don't have any right now across North and South Carolina, but there's a big winter storm brewing in the midsection of the United States, and also quite a bit of rainfall from Southern California turning into some snow into the Intermountain West. So let's show you what I'm talking about here. Let's fast forward this till we get to early this morning. We do have a system that is moving toward the northeast. You can see it right here coming out of Ontario into Quebec, and it will be draping a front that'll come right down here through the Appalachian Mountains through mid-morning and eventually through North Carolina throughout the day. But scattered showers at the very best, not much. I don't think any accumulation is what we're expecting at this point. And behind it, it's a big area of higher atmospheric pressure. Now that high pressure is going to slide east. And as it does so, by the time we get into Tuesday and Wednesday, it's now sitting over North Carolina. But on the back side of that, that's where our big winter storm is brewing. Well, the first of two winter storms is brewing, and it's going to be possibly producing quite a bit of ice as well. But what we notice is that by Wednesday, the frontal boundary is still across the central Corn Belt, getting down into the south central United States, and therefore we're going to stay much of the beginning of this week dry. To see how it finishes, though, I got to go over to the European model, and let's pause it right there. In fact, let's watch that again. If we let this go to Wednesday afternoon, now we can start to see the high sliding off of the East Coast, pumping that moisture back into place. So here is Wednesday afternoon and evening, getting into Thursday morning, afternoon, and evening. So our better chances of precipitation show up really on Thursday across North Carolina. But this is system number 2, when both of those troughs kind of start to merge in the southern plains, and the one on the backside flings the one on the front side north quickly. You ready? So this is going to come right through where I live, right here in the Midwest. And this is Friday morning, Friday afternoon, and evening. Now my concern is that by Friday evening, look at the frontal boundary out ahead of this. We could be putting pretty heavy precipitation down into the Appalachian Mountains and possibly another round of storms. But instead of being on the New Year's Eve, like we had the Christmas Eve storms a week ago, this is looking like it's going to be after, and it's going to be on that Saturday, really that Friday night into the Saturday that those storms roll through. So that gets us out all the way to this Saturday morning, afternoon, and evening. And then we do need to watch, and this is still a bit up in the air, but it appears that a little Gulf coastal low could show up in Florida and push here by Sunday afternoon, increasing our precipitation chances. And there might be enough cold air on the backside of that get some snow in the Appalachian Mountains. But this is still pretty, I don't know if this is going to materialize given that the two systems preceding it are still not well forecast at this point. But after that, I'll let you know the pattern continues to stay quite active. Now, we're staying clear of the snow through Saturday. Remember, it was that last system that came through, possibly giving us some Appalachian Mountain snow. So we're staying away from the snow through Saturday. But total liquid equivalent, well, we can look at it two ways here. This is first just looking at total precipitation coming through here. Why I show you the whole of the United States is this is good for the drought situation across the west and parts of the southern plains where we have drought. But if we look at this compared to normal, we can see that they're going to get a lot here. We're talking 2 to 4 inches of excess precipitation. We might see the same thing right over here along the Appalachian Mountains. In fact, let's just zoom in and get a view here over the next week. So this is out to Sunday night on total accumulated precipitation from the European model. So heaviest precipitation along the mountains here. After you get to the east of that, we're going to drop off pretty quickly to be, for the most part, below an inch of total accumulated precipitation through our next 7 days. But remember what I told you about that pattern. It comes screaming in like this, has to run over the mountains, invigorates new low pressure systems, and they go racing up into that negative North Atlantic oscillation pattern. It's all the way out there to January 7th. So when we look at exclusively week 2, it's active west, it's active central, and it's active east. Okay, so we just continue to see multiple systems rolling through the pattern, keeping things wetter than average, which is why I told you at the beginning of this video, I think we're going to maintain those high numbers in terms of our rank on precipitation for the year. How about temperatures next? Monday's going to be a warm one compared to normal across the eastern part of the state of North Carolina. But you can see there's some cooler air on the back side of this. Now, it gets to us on Tuesday, but watch the change from Tuesday. Here we go to Wednesday. That's going to be our coldest day here. Now, watch after this. Ready? As we get into the end of this week, there's Thursday's high temperatures, and the colors tell you compared to normal. Here comes Friday. As we then get into the weekend, there's Saturday and Sunday. We go back over toward a bit more mild conditions here. So overall, we wouldn't call this week warm, but it's coldest on the front end of it, as you just saw here. Looking out beyond that, let's go out here the day 5 through 10 pattern. And we see that in general, the coldest air tends to be stored over almost the Canadian archipelago back toward Alaska, with the big warmth heading into the North Atlantic. And that's going to tend to keep this side of North America on the warmer side of things. Because remember, the jet stream is coming in like this, zonal, not straight out of the north. So we're going to see what looks to be favoring mild conditions as we start the new year. And it's there out into week 2 as well. And look at how warm things are going to be here compared to normal. And we're going to get a taste of that down here along the southeast coast, getting up to the mid-Atlantic as well. Is there anything that could possibly upset this? Well, of course there is, and it has to do with the polar vortex. By January 7th, do you see this large blob of very warm colors here? That's a large ridge that's building right over the Arctic, and it has split the polar vortex, one piece here and another piece here. And that's going to disrupt the flow here in early January. Now, I've been showing you these graphs over on the right, so if you've been following along, you know what we're looking for here. The forecast shows a major decrease in those zonal winds. And as I've been stating, when the polar vortex values come down here towards 0 or even below 0, that indicates a significant disruption. And it takes time. It doesn't happen immediately. But if that disruption ends up translating into the troposphere, we could be on the lookout for a mid-January major cold snap moving forward. What other pieces are there to this temperature pattern? Well, La Nina, it is peaking right now, and the trade winds here are very strong. But we have seen periods of warmer conditions showing up over towards South America. Now, with that as the setup, the MJO is a bit of a mess right now. But there are some indications that over the next maybe month or so, it's going to pop out over here in phase 2 or 3. Now, phase 3 showed you up here on the top. That allows a bit more cooler air to come across the United States, while the warmth tends to stay here. It's the same thing with phase 2. You can almost see it here, much closer to average, even cooler than average at times with the warmth there. And that certainly bodes well with the North Atlantic oscillation staying over negative. So I wouldn't be surprised if it did come out and stay over in this area, therefore giving us these two temperature patterns moving forward. That's just a little bit of support in this long-range forecast. Because when I look out here at the month of January, we tend to see that, right? So look over here on the right, for example. That's the European model. On the left is the GFS. So this is for the whole of the month of January. We see that the colder wedge is kind of coming in from this direction, and the warmth is really settling in here in the Canadian Maritimes over there on the eastern side of the continent. So we tend to see that quite a bit at this point moving forward. One last thing to show you. I want to talk about South America. The models have gone back over next week, this upcoming week, back over to a drier bias in Brazil's central and northern growing areas. This could be the 5th dry stretch of weather that they've had. We've been detailing this throughout each of our briefings, and the question becomes, have the rains been timed well enough to outdo this drought that they're in? Because it's actually the driest in this area in the last 40 years. The driest in that area in the last 40 years. Down here into Argentina, this was over-predicted by the models, and now the latest forecasts are showing it what we expect, which is a slight dry bias. And getting out now to the week 2 forecast over here, notice that northern Mato Grosso still showing up with a slight dry bias, but wetter conditions farther to the south until you get into Argentina and Rio Grande do Sul showing up drier. So our weather story continues to be an issue in South America, but I have a feeling right now that a lot of folks are in a wait-and-see mode. In other words, the meteorologists, myself included, have shown that drought is regional and problematic, but until we start to see some of those numbers coming in and a delay in harvest, I don't know if we're going to have a major price reaction at this point. So just something to think about there. Hey, I appreciate your timing today. Hope you all have a great rest of your week, and we'll talk to you again very soon. Happy New Year.